Yep, the call is being recorded. We are escaping to India with Dr. Tabitha Benney, who is going to be leading our detour to India on March 2nd. Tabitha, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Great, thank you. And thank you for joining us for this escape on Saturday. My name, as she said, is Tabitha Benney. I am an expert in India. I've been working in and around India in academic circles since the early 2000s, mainly studying environmental issues relating to India, but also aspects of their economy and their political elements of their economy as well. I'm really excited to speak with everyone today and tell you a little bit about both how I fell in love with India, as well as to talk a little bit about the trip that we have planned for Dress or Detours to India for 2025. So I think many people are aware of the size and scale of India, but it's often surprising when we think about really the central location of India. It's the seventh largest country in the world. And then the northern aspect of it, the northern side of the country, we have the Himalayan mountains and bordered by Bhutan and Nepal and Bangladesh and China and Pakistan. So many important countries sort of bordering the northern side, as well as having this incredible large mountain range that gets a lot of attention from folks all over the world. To the southeast is the Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea on the other coast, which makes for all sorts of fascinating landscape around India. We really have everything from some of the highest mountain ranges in the world to some very low-lying areas, and even the islands off the coast near Sri Lanka as well have some very unique landscapes. We don't get down to it on this trip, but just south of Mumbai, there's one of the largest rainforests in the world in India as well. Many people aren't aware. It's got one of the most diverse landscapes in all of the world, in the southern mountain range, the Gap Mountain Range, towards the southern part of the state. So India is full of geological and geographic surprises, I think, for many people. But when we think about the sheer scale of India, I think it's really important to put it in comparison. So as you can see, it's about a third the size of the United States. But the population is anywhere between 1/6 to 1/7 the actual population size. One of the things I recall most from my last trip to India was actually returning home and just realizing how quiet it was when I returned home, because India is just so packed full of human beings. Everywhere you go and at all hours of the day, you really have human activity around you almost anywhere you go. So it's quite a large population. It's teetering on the most populated country in the world currently. And life expectancy is to around the age of 70. So there's some really strong development in certain parts of the country. There's two mega cities, Mumbai and Delhi, but also Chennai, another great city on the east coast of the country, that are becoming much more developed, where other parts of India remain quite backwards in terms of the level of development and things like that. So you'll see the cost of living is quite interesting. The housing is so much lower. The housing costs and grocery costs are so much less than what we find here in the United States, but the fuel costs are extreme. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It's the central location. The Himalayan mountain range to the north creates sort of a barrier to trade for a big part of the country. And there's a lot of partners that sort of have demand in that part of the world as well. So India has quite high fuel costs as a result. Despite all this, we see India growing, and I often talk excitedly about India's economy, but it's really projected to be one of the great economies in the next 10 years or so. So we see a lot of uptake of the currency, as well as just seeing the rising GDP across times. It's quite phenomenal to see that we're seeing rates similar to what we saw in China 10 years ago. And so this has to do with a lot of reform, but it also has to do with the growing productivity and the really high level of sophistication in some of the cities in India. So while you'll see people, picking cotton by hand in some of the rural areas, you'll see some of the great supercomputers of the entire world in the universities in India as well. So that dichotomy, or really that range of technology in this country, has benefited some parts more than others, but it's really driven the economy and will continue to drive the economy going forward. So I was introduced to India, as I said, in the early 2000s, around 2025 to 2027. I did a project with the National Academy of Science and the U.S. State Department, working with the government of India on a program called the Global Dialogues. And this was a way to connect scientists from both sort of sides of the pond, if you will, around important scientific topics, cutting edge topics that both countries were sort of leading. And it was a really great experience. I got to go back and forth to Delhi and to Chennai multiple times in that span of time, sometimes staying anywhere between 5 to 6 weeks at a time and returning home. So it was a really great experience. I got to know these cities very well and built up a lot of friendships and colleagues in these places. And that just really stuck with me. I really fell in love with India on those trips, and the people particularly is something I fell in love with. So when I went back to graduate school, I ended up working with a woman doing a Fulbright in India. It was a Fulbright on environmental projects that were being disseminated as part of the Kyoto Protocol. So environmental projects to try and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And because of that, we traveled throughout India. We spent 6 months straight traveling. Nearly every day we moved on to a new place, and I saw every nook and cranny of India at that time. So it was a really wonderful experience in terms of research and extending my experience as an academic. But it also got me to places that most Indians never get to go in India. And I really got to fall in love with the different types of people throughout the country, realizing the differences between the different regions and the different foods and all the little nuances that you get from really getting to know individuals. And so that was a wonderful experience. And I got to go back a couple of times in 2011 and even in 2013 related to that. And then from 2013 on, I just continued. I had, doing air quality work, doing energy work in India for quite some time. And even today, just recently, I gave a talk on water and climate change at one of the universities there. And I just get great opportunities because of the colleagues and sort of the network that I've built up from working in India over time. I'm very lucky for that. And I've started now bringing others to come visit the country. So as some of you already know, I've brought a few teams of people over to India. I've brought groups of scientists prior to that, but more and more people coming to enjoy the country. So the event that we've set up through Dressler Tours, I think does a great job of touching on some of the most important highlights of India. What's included is really, as I mentioned, these highlights, but really 5 key regions. Now, these aren't all the regions there are to see in India, but if you only have this one trip, it's really a wonderful experience to kind of touch on all those really different flavors, the main flavors of India, which is what we're trying to do with this trip. All these sort of elements are included in the trip. You can always go to the website to learn more, but we've really gone out of our way to handpick hotels as well as the restaurants or the places that we tend to go to shop or to eat and things like that. So it's a very curated experience, but one that's got flexibility built into it as well to allow people to enjoy things a little bit more if they're interested in other things, for example. Sorry. So the first stop, of course, is Mumbai. Mumbai is a great place, I think, to get to know India. It's one of the more modern cities of India. We wander along the coastal walkway. We go see the main ports. We spend some time in the Victorian galleries and the Art Deco region of the city. So it's a really nice way to introduce ourselves to see India from this new light and from this more sort of colonial perspective. On our way from Mumbai to Pune, our next city, is where we visit these Buddhist caves that we were talking about earlier. This cave tunnel on the right here is 3,000 years old. It's the Templar that's still left over from the original Buddhist temple. On the outside, however, is where they were bringing their chickens and goats to actually do sacrifices. So in fact, Bob was talking about these people dancing at the bottom is actually, these people came along and were essentially having a impromptu parade, and they came upon us and began dancing with us. And we ended up throwing chalk and dancing with each other and just sort of engaging for probably a good half an hour with these people that we met along the way. And we get lots of opportunities to do this. I think going around the holiday of Holi is really when people are sort of happy and excited to meet new people and excited to to be kind and share things with others. So it's a really fantastic time to travel to India, generally. But you get these great little impromptu experiences with the locals. Here is Pune, our next city, where we get to go out to the wine country. That's the state there at the bottom. We also visit the Golden Ganesh, which is what Bob was also referring to. So the Golden Ganesh is a really special treat. It's one of my favorite temples of Ganesh in all of India. It's quite off the beaten path. But it's one of these experiences that if you go, most Indians work until 6 or 7 o'clock at night. They're very hardworking. But when everyone gets off work, they all go to see the Golden Ganesh. And this is what Bob was referring to earlier, is that you get these huge crowds of people all trying to see the Golden Ganesh. And so the whole crowd sort of mushes together and starts moving through this temple to see the Golden Ganesh. And it's quite elaborate. It's a beautiful temple, quite open, but it's a great experience to immerse yourself with the locals and really experience their traditions and, again, their kindness. As I mentioned, many people were giving us sweets. My daughter Adelaide, down there on the right hand side, she was at the Bolshwari temple with us as well out in Pune, and everyone kept giving her little flowers. She had little flowers tucked behind her ears at the temples from all these people kindly kind of giving her little treats and things. So it's a really lovely experience. Pune, you really feel like you can mix in with the locals there. You're not really sticking out like a sore thumb like you might in some other places, but it's a very relaxed and interesting part of India, and one that not everyone gets to see. The most typical, and I think one of the highlights, again, of the trip is really the visit to Agra. Of course, the iconic Taj Mahal is a wonderful experience. This trip, we've actually arranged for hotels we've arranged for a hotel that's got a view of the Taj Mahal. So we arrive and we have this beautiful view in the restaurant as well as from the hotel, where we can admire the Taj Mahal from afar. A little sort of treat before we go the next morning to see the Taj Mahal first thing in the morning, which is really lovely, with all the reflecting in the pools in the morning, etc. So I think it'll be a really great experience to get down and see the Taj Mahal early with the less crowds and things as well, which makes for photography and better photography and things like that as well. So the Red Fort and some other beautiful things that you might experience down there. It's full wedding season while we're there as well. So I don't know if others remember that, but it's a great experience to go and see Agra just covered in flowers from all the weddings that are occurring at that time of year. And it's a really great experience. We also went to see the how people make the marble carving. So the original families that made the Taj Mahal still are creating marble structures and these beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, intricate, beautiful marble tabletops and other things as well, which we had an opportunity to purchase. And I know many people were really excited to do that. When you see the craftsmanship and you see the quality of the product up close, it's just absolutely fascinating and quite time consuming to make the products that they make. Just stunning work. One of our very favorite stops is our visit to Jaipur. In Jaipur, there's so many sort of elements for the eyes. You really get this very exotic experience when you go to Jaipur. It's a Muslim part of India. There's all these elements left over from the Shah. It's considered the Pink City, and it's called the Pink City because it was painted to match in to disguise the city from the mountain because of the coloring in the mountains and the rocks in the mountain. Down on the bottom right here, that's the hand-printed clothing that I'm actually wearing mine today, but we arrived and we actually got to watch them hand printing the materials, and it was shocking. Some of these things that they're hand printing actually go to companies like Abercrombie and Finch and other companies like that we would all recognize, that we would never think that these things are hand stamped with these beautiful sort of intricacy and the delicacy that goes into making some of the products and the fabrics, etc. So it was a very cool experience to see that side of, I think, the creation of fabrics and whatnot. And then to have them handmade for us and delivered to us the next day at the hotel was a really fun experience for many of us. We ended up spending way too much time there. I think everybody got 1 or 2 outfits, including the guys. So it was a great experience. And my daughter's favorite part of the trip, of course, was riding these elephants. Now, I'm an animal lover, and I would be very cautious normally about, riding elephants or something like that. But these are the Rajasthani elephants. These people live with their elephants. They've been basically transporting people with their elephants for 30 or 40 generations, they claim. So this is a long-standing tradition in the Rajasthani people to sort of have one elephant, and your elephant is like your baby. So they take very, very good care of their elephants. It's a very limited window of time that the elephants are allowed to work. If the temperature gets too high, the elephants don't work anymore. But it's a whole sort of traditional thing that we partake in because it's how these people make their living, and it's something that they do regardless of they take very good care of the animals, etc. So it's a really fun experience and one that's really unique and special for that reason. We don't always get to have the opportunity to engage with animals like that. So it's a unique place. It's got this beautiful arabesque architecture everywhere, but it's also very scientifically advanced. There's an astrological park there, which they still use to tell time and to track planets, etc. And it's absolutely beautiful to actually walk around and see these gigantic sculptures that are actually scientifically accurate. So it's quite a unique place. And then we returned to Delhi. So Delhi is one of my favorite places in all of India. There are so many things to do in Delhi. You could really never run out of spending time there. We go and touch on all the highlights. We see all sorts of things, including that's the Lotus Temple there on the left. The Qutb Minar is another beautiful, just does not come to scale in this picture. This absolutely beautiful and quite old. I think these are first century Byzantine. What do they call them? Spires, and they're quite beautiful in person. They're absolutely in pristine condition as well. So we do travel around. We have some lovely food while we're in Delhi. We try all sorts of cuisine while we're there. Spend some time in Old Delhi. So we walk into some of the less beautiful areas of the city and spend some time in these old sort of overgrown cities and underground aspects of the lower income people that live on the far side of the city. But it's quite safe, and it's a really wonderful experience to go and see how these other people are living, how they sort of make do day in and day out. We'll try some butter chicken while we're in Delhi, of course, and then we're hoping that people can try some henna and have some few days before Holi to go off and try some things now that they've grown accustomed to getting around in India. And then the last night there, we wrap up with Holi. So Holi begins the night before the day event. And we have these large bonfires and this really lovely experience where we get to walk through it with, we go out to dinner and walk back through it. And then the next day we go out and spend some time with the locals, talking to people and just immersing ourselves in with the population. We have a hotel party that last year got a little out of hand, but it was a really lovely experience nonetheless that we ended up having inside the hotel ourselves. So we always make do. But after that, some people will fly home that night and others will kind of go on. So that's really it. I hope you'll consider joining us for this trip. Tanya, I put your information as well as Christoph's down here, as well as the link to the webpage for the India trip. If anyone has any questions, I'm really excited to hear your thoughts and answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Tabitha. I want to know what it is that you look forward to returning to every time you go to India.
So there are a few friends that I really miss and love going back to see. So my friend Rajiv in particular, him and his whole entire family in Pune, they always look out for us. Even if they're not there, somebody always comes by and visits or something like that. So I have some really great friends in Delhi and in Pune that I love. But truthfully, I love Indian food. The naan bread is just so good. I live for the naan bread. I do live for, the curries are absolutely scrumptious and at a whole nother level that's so hard to explain to other people. Just the intricacy of the cooking and the food there. I miss how friendly people are. You really talk to everybody when you're there. And I absolutely love showing India to other people. It just never gets tiring to show other people, Americans. They're so welcoming to Americans. They love Americans, but they also are just as fascinated about you as you are about them. So you could really just go into any restaurant or bar and you could sit down and you'll be up all night just talking with anybody. Everyone's so friendly. It's just a wonderful place. I really do enjoy showing people what a great country it is.
India seems to be a land of contrasts. What do you think, as an American going to India for the first time, what do you think would strike me either as something really positive or as something really different?
Yeah. So the amount of people around you at all times is something that some people do struggle with a little bit, and you usually get used to it. In fact, I would say almost everybody by the end is fine with it and is quite comfortable with it. So in some sense, it can be good that it's lively and bustling all the time. I mean, when you arrive at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's bustling in the airport. It's absolutely like it's the middle of the day when you arrive. It's just absolutely crowded and going. So in some sense, it's great because you can go any time of the day and you can sort of arrange different things. But it can be hard for some people to adapt to that. It's not dangerous, which is, I think, the most positive thing. You can be crowded in all these people, but the chance of you getting even pickpocketed is unusual. People just really are not criminals in the way that we might run into in the travel industry when, you might be picked out as vulnerable. The only thing you might get picked out for in India is, they might come over and talk to you and talk your ear off because they just want to know everything about who you are and what you're doing. So I think that's sort of the surprising part, is just how safe it really is, especially you can go into the most, what we would call, slums of India, and they'll feed you their last food. They're not going to take anything from you. And I think it's really, that part can be really fascinating for people to see and experience. They just won't believe it. I mean, you always get people in the beginning, they're almost rude, that don't want these people near them. They're afraid they're going to get ripped off or somebody's going to try and steal from them. And it turns out that it just doesn't happen. So, on the one hand, I think, as my daughter experienced in the beginning, she was like, "It's like I'm a movie star. Everybody loves me here." And then by the end, she was like, "Can you put a veil around my head? Everybody's trying to talk to me nonstop." So I do think that she stands out even more so than most of us as Americans because she's blonde hair and blue eyed and little. So, um, but I don't know. I think it's a wonderful part about the Indian people. They're just honest and loving and kind. Not everyone's perfect, right? There's definitely some bad apples out there. I'm not saying that there aren't, but for the most part, they're just really kind people. And they're one of the highlights of India, is actually spending time with the Indian people and eating the naan bread.
You're making me hungry.
It is so good.
So obviously we're going there as a group, but what would you tell a single traveler, especially a single female traveler, about preparing for an experience in India?
So I will say, and I've traveled alone in India before, that in particular American women, that most Indian men are actually slightly afraid of American women. For example, Indian women almost never drink alcohol, and so they see, if there's a woman drinking in a bar in India, it's usually an American woman, right? So they see American women as being a little bit stronger and a little bit more dominant, and so they tend to have a good reverence for American women. Now, that goes without saying, right? The inequality in India, especially on the gender lines, is stark. It's one of the worst, even in Asia. And so, you really don't want to be in the wrong place at the wrong time as a woman traveling by yourself in India. If you're in, the major tourist areas, nobody's really going to try something, right? But if they do, you can always try hissing at them.
I've heard that you
But
have this approach.
so, if people are superstitious and you hiss at them, it scares them off a little bit. So we make a joke about that, but it does actually work very well. But as with any country, I don't think India is the place you should be traveling alone as a woman per se. But I do think it can be pretty safe. I would say even two women together can travel India fairly safely, right? But going to any rural or off the beat areas, that would be probably off plate for most women. Be a little bit dangerous. So you really do want to travel with companions or with a group if you're going to travel to India, especially if you go to sort of the lesser known areas. For sure.
And do I need a visa to go to India as an American?
You do need a visa. There is a process that you can go through. I think last time we actually used a service and did them all together. So if you have a group that's going together, you can just use the visa service, and they basically have you fill out a form and they take care of all the rest for you. I think you need a photograph and the forms filled out, they actually have you send in your visa. So your visa gets held, your passport to them. And that usually, I think mine got turned around from start to finish. I think it took 5 or 6 days total, including the mail time to get my visa, processed and back to me. So,
And what about
did you have that experience? Sorry, Bob, did you have that experience? Was it quick for you?
So I'm mixing up trips because there was one trip where, so the first time we signed up before COVID, I definitely remember going through the passport service. But why did I think it was online? But I might be mixing that up.
It was
with
online.
It was, yeah.
It was online for sure. I think it was pretty easy.
Yeah, it was pretty easy to do. There was a little bit of weirdness with something that we had to do with the credit card.
Oh, you had to go through the entire application and put all the credit card information in within a 10-minute window, or it would restart. That's what happened.
Right. But then,
Yeah.
but otherwise, and then you print it out on your printer and you just have it with you.
Yeah, they have e-visas.
Yeah.
So you can do it all online. And then when you get in country, they put the visa in while you're arriving.
Okay. Yeah.
And are there any medications that I would have to think of?
So some people take malaria medication when they're traveling around India. Everyone has to take tuberculosis. So tuberculosis, you can either take the active pills where you take them those last 2 years, or there's a shot that you can do that'll last for up to 12 months. They prefer that children take the shot, but most adults, if you're not traveling regularly, will most likely need the tuberculosis inoculation. If you haven't had your tetanus shot, of course, you'll have to update that. We always encourage people to get the flu shot and the COVID shot before, traveling anywhere abroad anymore. But those are really, for our trip, I did not take any malaria medication. I didn't feel like we were located anywhere long enough where I would want the medication, especially because it was, we were mostly covered up pretty well in those areas. But if I were going to stay longer or go in more humid times of the year, even though it was pretty hot and humid while we were there the last time, I think I would probably take medication for malaria. And that's probably the only thing.
So we paid for our trip by selling other travelers our spare Pepto-Bismol. So I would say definitely having Pepto-Bismol tablets to help with the occasional deli belly.
Yeah. I bring Cipro with me. So I just ask for travel medicine. So it's usually Cipro. And the first day I start having diarrhea, I take a Cipro. All the hotels will also give you, like a 1-day, 24-hour antibiotic if you start getting kind of like tummy aches. Mm-hmm. But Delhi is one of these places where you have to be cautious about drinking the water. You can't even brush your teeth with the water. You have to stay away from freshly washed fruits and things like that. So salads that are wet and things like that, unless, that's why we stay in these really nice hotels that know how to manage Westerners and help to prevent them from getting sick. But regardless, people always tend to rinse their teeth or open their mouth in the shower or other things like that. And it can really, you never know where or when it's going to happen. But I would say half the folks on the trip will get some kind of, traveler's diarrhea on the trip. And so for me, it's just been, I get the Cipro. As soon as I start having diarrhea, I take it, and it's usually 4 or 5 hours and I'm already on the mend. So it is something you have to pay attention to, especially for older folks.
Cipro has saved me many a time.
I've gone so many times now that I forget. The funny kind of part about going to India is a lot of people will kind of have a little bit of acid indigestion, especially around day 3 or 4, and they'll start thinking that they're getting like some deli belly kind of thing. But it's just that they have such fresh herbs and spices there that your body is literally reacting to all the turmeric and cumin and all these other things that you eat in such quantities there, that it is kind of funny. You'll get some people are like, I think I'm getting sick, but it's actually just, it's sensitive to all the buildup of, and you also will leave India smelling like you're Indian because, it actually really gets into your pores and starts coming out of your skin by the time you've been there for 2 weeks. So it's good. It's a good thing. If you don't come back smelling like an Indian, then you didn't eat enough Indian food.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions?
My comment is that was awfully fun to see some of those pictures. That brought back a lot of great memories from that trip. So
Yeah.
we won't do it on this one, but we would love to see maybe a little bit different itinerary. I don't think it'd be too hard to sign up for that trip.
Yeah. Yeah. As I said, we would love to do a part B. We've had a couple of people inquire about it already. And we had actually started laying it out. But I think getting this first trip off the ground and maybe getting another group of people that might want to go back for a round two would be really, really lovely. So if you know anyone else that would love to go to India, let me know. I'd love to connect with them and spread the word a little bit more as well.
Okay.
We even got Mr. Ali to come back and work with us again. So it's going to be really fun to have him. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, I'm just going to stop recording now. I'm not going to end the call, but thank you for anyone else who's out there watching. If you care to join our India detour, it's March 2nd to the 14th, 2025. You can learn more at DresslerDetours.com.